Pope Francis asked to say goodbye to his dog seconds before dying, and no one could hold back his tears. The halls of the Apostolic Palace had never felt so silent, not in all the years since he took the seat of St. Peter, not during global crises, not even when the world shut its doors in fear of death. Now, as the man known as Pope Francis lay in his bed, his white robes wrinkled, his hands trembling, his eyes half-lidded, the silence felt sacred and cruel all at once. He was dying, and for all the theologians, doctors, and cardinals gathered around him, he had only one request. "Bring me Esteban." The room froze. Bishop Alonso leaned closer. "Your Holiness, you mean?" Francis blinked, gathering breath. "My dog," he whispered. "Please." Esteban was no ordinary creature in Vatican City. Golden brown, gentle-eyed, and quiet as a prayer, Esteban had followed Francis for 5 years like a silent shadow. He wasn't trained. He never wore a vest or badge. But everyone knew him. Guards, gardeners, even heads of state. Because he was always there. He had once sat beneath the Pope's desk during a meeting with an African president. He had once padded calmly through the Sistine Chapel as Francis prayed alone beneath Michelangelo's final judgment. No one dared to shoo him. Esteban was the Pope's quietest companion, and the only one who had been by his side through every heartbreak the robes had hidden. Francis had found him the morning after Cardinal Matteo's funeral. Matteo had been his brother in all but blood. They met in seminary in Buenos Aires, prayed beside each other through revolution, whispered secret jokes into their sleeves during conclaves. When Matteo died suddenly of cardiac arrest, Francis wandered the edge of the city that morning, unable to speak, grieving like a man unmoored. There, outside the southern Vatican gate, was a dog. Thin, trembling, ribs like blades, fur caked in dried blood. Curled beneath the stone feet of a statue of St. Francis of Assisi, the Pope knelt down, not as a pontiff, as a man broken. The dog lifted his head, met his eyes, and nudged forward. Francis had whispered, "Are you here for me?" Esteban had licked his hand. That day the Pope ordered him fed, given space, allowed anywhere. But Esteban never needed commands. He simply followed. The world would never know how many nights they'd spent in silence together, when bombings happened, when letters came soaked in hate, when pressure built too tightly around the chest of the man tasked with leading over 1 billion souls. Esteban would sit beside the Pope's chair. No collar, no expectations, only presence. The guards used to joke he was a holy dog, but Francis never joked. He'd once said softly to a visiting priest, "He doesn't ask questions. That's what makes him sacred." Now, Esteban was older, his face wider around the muzzle, his gait stiff. He no longer trotted beside the Pope on morning walks. But he still waited, still knew when the rhythm of the papal heart had shifted. And tonight, when Sister Alina entered the dog's chamber in the garden quarters, Esteban lifted his head sharply, as if he knew. She opened the gate, and he walked, hurried, without leash or command, paws echoing through the marble halls. The door to the Pope's chamber opened, and Francis turned his head, the motion slow and raw, and saw his friend. He smiled. Not the smile for crowds, not the rehearsed kind that gets etched into bronze. A real one. "Come," he rasped. Esteban padded across the room. He placed both front paws on the edge of the bed, nose against the Pope's wrist. Francis leaned forward and wept into his fur, the sobs shaking his whole chest. No one moved. A cardinal's lips quivered. The attending physician turned away. because they had never seen the Vicar of Christ cry like that. "Do you remember the olive tree?" the Pope whispered. Esteban blinked, ears flicking gently. "The one in Assisi? You ran circles around it," Francis smiled, "and I thought, even he understands peace better than we do." His hand trembled as it brushed behind Esteban's ear. "I'm sorry for the days I was too tired, for the ones I shut the door. You were always there." A long pause. "You stayed." The dog curled tighter against him. For minutes there was no prayer, no Latin, no pageantry, just the sound of an old man's breath and the warm weight of loyalty pressed against his chest. Someone in the corner tried to speak. Francis held up a finger. Not yet. He looked down at Esteban. "I'm afraid." The admission dropped like a stone in holy water. "But you're here. That helps." He kissed the top of the dog's head. "Stay with me. Just a little longer." And Esteban did. He didn't move, didn't flinch. He lay beside the Pope, heart against heart, eyes watching the only human who had ever called him family. The clock in the papal residence read 2:07 a.m. when the breathing slowed. The cardinals had gathered quietly along the walls, hands clasped. Sister Alina whispered prayers beneath her breath. The Vatican physician had already stepped aside. There was nothing left to monitor, only silence, and the dog. Esteban lay curled beside the Pope, unmoving, his soft brown eyes wide open, watching the man who had given him purpose draw what would be his last full breath. Then gently the Pope opened his mouth. One last time. Not to quote scripture, not to bless the room, but to whisper into Esteban's ear, "You were my greatest peace." And then he was gone. No one moved. A cardinal choked back a sob. Another looked away, his shoulders shaking. Esteban remained still. He did not howl. He did not panic. He simply lowered his head onto the Pope's chest and closed his eyes, as if to say, "I'll wait a little longer." By sunrise word had spread. The Pope had passed peacefully, surrounded by clergy and prayers. But what spread even faster, what touched even the hardest, coldest hearts, was the image taken just moments after. A golden brown dog curled tightly against his chest, refusing to leave. The world responded. People wept in airports, churches, train stations. They painted murals of Esteban beside the Pope. Artists drew them walking beneath the olive trees of Assisi. But the most stunning moment came during the funeral. As the casket was carried into St. Peter's Basilica, thousands watched on screens. The processional halted briefly because Esteban had followed it to the very doors. Guards tried to stop him. The Vatican guards, trained, disciplined, hesitated because he didn't bark, he didn't run, he just sat at the foot of the steps and wouldn't move. It was Pope Francis's private secretary who finally stepped forward. With red eyes and trembling voice, he pulled a folded note from his breast pocket. The Holy Father left a personal request, just for Esteban. He opened it and read, barely above a whisper, "Let him walk with me one last time." So Esteban did, slowly, solemnly. He followed the casket all the way to the altar, and when the Mass ended, when the Pope was laid to rest, Esteban sat near the tomb for hours, just waiting. Later that week, Vatican officials discovered something unexpected. In the Pope's private study, beneath his desk, in a sealed drawer, was a final letter written in his own hand. "If you're reading this, I am gone. Please make sure Esteban is safe. He has carried my grief, guarded my joy, and taught me more about mercy than most men ever could. Do not keep him out of the gardens. Do not cage him in rooms. Let him roam. Let him belong, because he never left me, not once. Francisco. Esteban now lives in the Vatican gardens. He sleeps beneath the olive tree planted in the Pope's memory. He wanders the paths visitors cannot go. And each morning he pauses outside the chapel doors, just like he always did, not waiting for a miracle, just remembering the man who never asked him to be anything except loved. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more emotional, dramatic, and unexpected tales. And let us know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from? We love hearing from all of you. Until next time, stay kind, stay curious, and keep watching.